These N-word laws still exist today. Let's take a look. Willkommen! My name is Sean Huggins and this is React with Hugs.
I want to see how he reacts when he thinks no one's watching.
I can't help it if he's weird.
He's American.
He's going crazy with that work.
Everybody reacts differently.
I think he's weird, but that's me.
He's American, you know.
Welcome to React with Hugs. Let's take a look at today's comment of the day. So today's comment of the day comes from That Jack 758, and they say, "Great analysis, man. Blew my mind. You ever think about collabing with Feli from Germany?" Thank you so much for the nice comment. Much appreciated. And to answer your question, no, I never thought about collaborating with Feli from Germany because at the time of recording this, she has over 100 times the amount of subscribers that I do. You know, I get a lot of questions and comments like this. "Oh, dude, you should collaborate with this creator. You should collaborate with this creator. You should collaborate with this person." I would love to. I would love to collaborate with basically anybody, to be honest. But all the people that everyone suggests are people that have like 100,000, 200, 500, a million plus subscribers. And I'm like, dude, I have just a couple thousand subscribers. No one is going to want to collaborate with me. Like, of course not. So yeah, I would love to collaborate with them or even smaller creators. I would collaborate with basically anybody as long as the fit is right, as long as it makes sense. I would collaborate with anybody. I don't care about any of that. I just don't think that anybody like Feli from Germany would want to collaborate with me because it just doesn't make sense for them, you know? But I mean, maybe one day, if you keep sharing the videos, commenting, subscribing, all of that good stuff, then we can grow the channel and hopefully do some pretty cool collaborations somewhere down the line in the future. For now, though, you guys are stuck with just me, unfortunately. So until then, let's get into today's reaction. So, oh my gosh, look at this. What perfect timing. It's Feli from Germany. Yeah, she has over 500,000 subscribers at the time of recording this. I have 5,000 subscribers at the time of recording this. So there's not much that I could offer her in the way of a collaboration type of thing, as much as I would like to do it because I do enjoy her content. Also, this isn't a complete deal breaker, but she is living in America and I'm currently living in Germany, so we would have to do some sort of remote collaboration thing. Not the biggest deal in the world, but I don't know. There's just so many things that doesn't make sense about this, but the biggest thing is that she's just a huge creator compared to me. So maybe if you guys suggest some creators that are around the same size as me at this time, 5,000 or so subscribers, then, you know, maybe I could reach out. Maybe we could do some collaborative type of stuff, but I don't think somebody with 500,000 subscribers is going to be like, "Oh yeah, let's do a video with this random dude with a couple thousand." But anyways, today we're checking out Feli from Germany's video titled "These N-word laws still exist today." This should be interesting because when people think of the N-words, it's always a negative thing. It's you know, for good reason. Obviously, everyone knows the history, so the contrast of still having laws around today that they put into place is very eye-catching. But just because they were terrible people and did a lot of terrible things doesn't mean that they necessarily had all terrible ideas. You know what I mean? So I'm assuming that the laws are, you know, not so terrible today. I'm assuming if they're still in place. So I don't know for sure, but we're going to find out together, I guess. That's the point of this video. But without further ado, enough rambling. Los geht's.
These are regular German laws that are applied every single day, but what many people don't know is that they were originally written over 80 years ago by the Nazi regime.
The N-words!
Hello, servus, and welcome back to my YouTube channel.
Hello,
my name is
moin
Feli.
moin.
I'm originally from Munich, Germany, but I've been living
München.
here in Cincinnati, Ohio, on and off since 2016. Here in the US, having laws that are older than 80 years isn't really something out of the ordinary. That's pretty standard, actually. I mean, this country and its
lot of
constitution,
old laws.
so the fundamental principles and values of
Outdated
the country
laws.
are over 200 years old. But in Germany, as you can imagine, when a law is over 80 years old, that means that it goes back to a pretty dark time in German history, the Third Reich. Now, modern-day Germany is not the same country anymore as
not the
that
second,
Germany.
but the third.
After the end of World War II, the borders were readjusted, Germany was split up, and in 1949, a new German state was founded, the Federal Republic of Germany. Bundesrepublik Deutschland, with a new constitution, new laws,
Deutschland.
and the mission of denazification, which was something that the Allied powers had started right after the war ended in 1945. And rightly so. However, instead of drafting every single law for this new country from scratch, a lot of the previously existing laws were simply adapted. As long as they aligned with the fundamental principles of the new German state, the Freiheitlich-Demokratische Grundordnung, which
Gesundheit. What did you say? Freiheitlich demokratisch Grundordnung. Oh my gosh. That's a, what do you guys call it? A tongue breaker? That's a tongue breaker for me. Holy crap.
which loosely translates to liberal democratic basic order. So a free and anti-totalitarian political structure. Of course, laws that were clearly violating those principles, such as laws that were discriminatory or were obviously serving the purpose and ideology of the Nazi regime, were fully abolished. But laws that seemed rather apolitical and harmless, that were simply regulating everyday situations, were often just slightly adjusted, rephrased, and carried over into the new German state.
Dude, I wonder if, like, the way that the world is moving nowadays with, like, political correctness and, you know, erasure of anything bad that has happened in history, I wonder if there will come a time in the future, maybe 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now, where people go back and they're like, well, this law has been around since the N-words. We need to get rid of it because it has to do with them. You can trace it back to them, even if the law is completely, you know, fair and unbiased and whatever. I'm curious if in the future there will be some sort of movement to get rid of anything and all things that have to do with it, and with that, maybe they will change those laws just because they date back to that time. You know what I mean? I could see that happening with how, you know, a lot of these social justice movements are trending nowadays. You know what I mean? Anyways, just a random thought. Let's continue.
And in some cases, laws were even kept the exact same. And even though the Federal Republic of Germany is over 70 years old now, which means there has been a lot of time for potential law changes, there are still about 30 laws in place today that are remnants from the Nazi regime. One of them is Section 211 of the German Criminal Code, the Strafgesetzbuch, the section about murder. Mörder ist, wer aus Mordlust, zur Befriedigung des Geschlechtstriebs, aus Habgier oder sonst aus niedrigen Beweggründen, heimtückisch oder grausam oder mit gemeingefährlichen Mitteln oder um eine andere Straftat zu ermöglichen oder zu verdecken, einen Menschen tötet. Which translates to, a murderer is whoever kills a human out of a lust to kill, to obtain sexual gratification, out of greed or other base motives, malignantly or cruelly, or by means constituting a public danger, or to facilitate or cover up another offense. This law, with the exact same wording, was originally written in 1941 by the State Secretary of the Reich Ministry of Justice, Karl Roland Freisler. He was a judge and prominent ideologue of Nazism and an attendee of the Wannsee Conference in 1942, which was the event that set the Holocaust in motion. He was killed during a bomb attack in Berlin in February of 1945. The only thing that was changed about this law when it was adapted in 1949 was the death penalty, which used to be the punishment for murder under the Nazis, but in the Federal Republic of Germany, that was fully abolished. Instead, murder in modern-day Germany is punished with imprisonment for life. In practice, that means at least 15 years in prison, after which the convict has the chance to get out on parole if they've shown good behavior.
Let me pause you there. Let me stop it there. Hold on a second. Hold on a second. Let's run that back.
Punished with imprisonment for life. In practice, that means at least 15 years in prison, after which the convict has the chance to get out on parole if they've shown good behavior.
Bro, for murder, you could do 15 years for murder and then get out on parole for good behavior. Wow. That seems like, I don't know. For murder? 15 years for murder? Now, maybe that's not so common for someone to get out on parole in just 15 years, but dude, that seems crazy. You could just have murderers walking around, I guess.
Besondere Schwere der Schuld, which literally translates to particularly heavy guilt. So in extreme cases, the convict will be put into Sicherungsverwahrung after their time in prison, which is basically a preventive detention, which is also a remnant from the Nazi regime, by the way. It was first established in 1933. Now, this definition of murder has been criticized in Germany for decades, and many lawyers have called for a justice reform of this.
Really? I wonder why. I don't know enough about it. I haven't studied it enough or analyzed it enough to really have an opinion why it would not be a good law, but let's find out.
If we take a closer look at it again, you'll notice that, unlike in many other countries, in Germany, murder is not defined as a premeditated killing per se, but a killing where at least one of these characteristics applies. Any other intentional killing is usually deemed Totschlag in Germany, so manslaughter. And then there is...
okay, so... I can see how maybe you can get around some of these murder accusations in certain situations then.
Fahrlässige Tötung, which is involuntary manslaughter or killing due to negligence. One of the main points of criticism about this law is that things like base motives or killing malignantly are such vague terms that leave a lot of room for interpretation, which makes this law tricky to apply. I mean, how do you decide what falls under a base motive and what doesn't? It's often described as motives that are at the lowest moral level, that are particularly selfish and contemptible, but doesn't that apply to most motives of murder? Now, from what I've read, this law actually benefited the Nazis themselves to commit their mass murder without falling under any of these murder categories, at least according to their interpretation of the law. Before they passed this definition of murder, it actually was defined as premeditated killing, which, of course, would have applied to their actions as well. I mean, deporting millions of people and systematically killing them is as premeditated as it gets. And since this law was carried over into the Federal Republic of Germany too, some experts say that it even ended up helping some Nazi members during their trials that they had to face after the war.
Wow. Okay, dude. Okay, so that's crazy because I could see where that could be the case because, no pun intended, because if you don't have something in there about like premeditated whatever, I mean, that's directly how it applies to them. It's all premeditated. They built camps and systems to try to exterminate and did exterminate millions of people. So that's the definition of premeditated. But if you don't have that language in the law, then you can't apply it to them. Oh, dang, this is crazy.
Another point of criticism about this law is that it can lead to verdicts that seem unjust from a moral point of view. Like if an abusive husband were to beat up his wife to the point where she died, it would only be ruled manslaughter, but if a woman killed her abusive husband while standing behind him or while he's asleep, because she wouldn't stand a chance in a face-to-face confrontation, it would be ruled murder due to the malignant nature of the attack, because he wouldn't have been able to defend himself. Another point that's often criticized is that the law doesn't even technically define what murder is, but rather who a murderer is, implying that murderers are a certain category of people with the crime only being a symptom of their personality that they're born with, which is kind of problematic morally and doesn't align with how our modern-day justice system views perpetrators. I mean, this one and the section about manslaughter are the only two laws that are defining the nature of the perpetrator rather than the crime itself. Another very important German law that goes back to the Nazi regime and that affects about 40% of the German population every single year is Ehegattensplitting. I know that's one of these long German words. It literally translates to spouse splitting, using the English word
divorce
splitting there, and it's the tax law that's applied when a married couple files their taxes together. In English, you might refer to this as income splitting. Now, the Ehegattensplitting in its current form was passed in 1958, and it's not exactly the same law as during the Third Reich, but the principle is still pretty much the same, which is why it's mainly beneficial for couples who have a big income gap. So where one part...
Yeah, I still don't fully understand the tax laws in Germany. Like, me and Issa aren't married yet, so it hasn't applied to us, but we have friends who are married, and people have tried to explain it to me, like the different system, the different classes of different income classes, and how it affects how you are when you're married, and the different... and I don't get it. I need to watch a video on that, I think. I need to do some research on that because I don't get it still.
Makes significantly more money than the other. The Nazis passed this law in 1934 with the goal to encourage women to stay off the job market and be housewives and stay-at-home moms instead.
Interesting.
That's the role that they wanted women to take on in their society. Before this, the taxation laws for married couples had actually made a lot of progress during the 1920s, making it a little more beneficial for a married woman to have her own income as well. Funny enough, after the Nazis passed this law in 1934, they actually implemented an exception for this rule only 7 years later in 1941 when they realized that they needed women to join the workforce after all. In the arms industry. Today, Ehegattensplitting in Germany means that both incomes are added together, divided by 2, and then you can see which tax bracket you fall under, and that tax bracket then applies to both of you, and you each pay 50% of your mutual taxes.
Actually, that is way easier than I thought. For some reason, every time anyone has ever tried to explain it to me, they come up with all these different ways of explaining it, and I don't understand what they're saying, but that is way easier. You add everything up, divide it by 2, and that's the bracket that you guys both pay. Okay, cool.
So if one partner makes 80,000 euros a year, they would usually be in the 42% tax bracket. And if the other partner, let's say, makes 20,000 euros, that would usually put them in the 24 to 42% tax bracket. But if they did income splitting, they would now both be in that 24 to 42% bracket because 80,000 plus 20,000 is 100,000, divided by 2 is 50,000. Now, if both partners earn about the same amount of money, being married oftentimes doesn't save them any taxes. But they do also have the option to file their taxes separately. For comparison...
So it's really good if you are a very high income earner and your spouse makes little to no income, then you add both your incomes, you divide it by 2, and then your high income earner pays a lot less taxes if you're married. Interesting theory. In
the US, for example, there are separately defined tax brackets for when you file as a married couple. And even though it's also more beneficial for couples who have a bigger income difference, there are a lot of additional deduction benefits for them. So for most couples in the US, it does make sense to file jointly.
Yeah, there's a lot of benefits to being married in America financially and stuff. So yeah, it's a little bit more straightforward in America. Maybe not straightforward in the sense that it's easy to understand, but straightforward in the sense that pretty much everybody, if you're going to get married, you're probably going to save on taxes. Whereas in Germany, it seems like if you make the same amount, then it doesn't really do anything.
One of the main points of criticism about the German model, of course in practice this gets a lot more complicated than the simple breakdown I just gave you, is that it puts a lot of couples in a situation where financially it doesn't make sense for the woman in most cases to go back to work after having a kid or to turn her part-time job into a full-time job because the extra money would end up causing the couple a disadvantage in their taxes and they wouldn't actually end up with any more cash in their pockets. And why?
See, that's something that is different in America. If we go back here, in America, each of these different percentage tax rates, you only pay for that amount of money. So when you're single, from $0 to $11,000 made in the year, you pay 10% taxes. From $11,001 to $44,000, you pay 12% taxes. But you don't pay 12% taxes on the first $11,000. You know what I'm saying? You only pay the 12% taxes on $11,001 all the way up to $44,725. And then after you start making $44,726, you pay 22% just on this bracket. You know? So if you're married and you're filing your taxes together, you pay 10% from 0 to 22,000, and then anything after that, you pay 12,000. Anything after 89,450, you pay 22%, but just on everything after that. Does that make sense? So there's really no way for you to like make less money from paying taxes. You just pay more percentage for each of the brackets that you go up, but not any of the ones before that. That probably doesn't make any sense. Let's just continue.
Any more cash in their pockets. And why go to work if it doesn't benefit you financially and you could have used that time for other things instead? As a consequence, a lot of women become financially dependent on their husbands, don't get to pay into their retirement funds, and long term, this also contributes to the fact that in Germany, women are a lot more likely to suffer from poverty when they're old. Now, there are many more pros and cons about the German income splitting, but at the end of the day, knowing that this goes back to the Nazis' attempts to control women's career options definitely leaves a weird taste. And the Nazis didn't only leave us with laws
leaves a
regarding
weird taste in my
crime or
mouth.
taxes, they even influenced our holidays, like the one that's taking place tomorrow,
Christmas.
May 1st, which is Labor Day in Germany, Tag der Arbeit. Now, the history of this day started way before the Nazi regime and actually originated here in the US with the Haymarket Affair in Chicago in 1886, where workers protested for the 8-hour workday. A lot of
from
the people
America.
organizing this were German immigrants, by the way. Protests lasted for several days and eventually escalated with a bomb being thrown and police shooting the protesters, and several people died. Today, the 8-hour workday is a common standard around the world. A few years after the Haymarket Affair, May 1st became an international memorial day to commemorate the victims of the riots and to continue fighting for workers' rights. But in Germany, it wasn't until 1933 that the National Socialists, aka the Nazis, officially declared it a federal holiday in Germany. For that first year, they called it Tag der nationalen Arbeit, so Day of National Work or National Labor. And they even made it a paid holiday, which to the workers' movements and the unions was literally a dream come true.
Back in 1930s, getting a paid holiday? Woo! You can go home after your 20-hour shift and you have a paid holiday the next day? Man!
However, this was just the first step in their plan to completely eliminate unions, which actually happened the very next day on May 2nd, 1933.
Oh, wow, what?
Still, they decided to keep May 1st as a holiday, but from now on, they called it Nationaler Feiertag des deutschen Volkes, so National Holiday of the German people. Together with the existing traditions of spring festivals that took place around that time, it turned into a big celebration with parades, fireworks, and Hitler giving a big speech. When the Federal Republic of Germany was founded, it stayed a public holiday in all German states, but its name and meaning went back to the roots, which is why today it's officially known as Labor Day, Tag der Arbeit. Well, except for Nordrhein-Westfalen, where they chose to call it Tag des Bekenntnisses zu Freiheit und Frieden, sozialer Gerechtigkeit, Völkerversöhnung und Menschenwürde, in order to clearly separate the day from its
Why would you do
this
that?
Translates to Day of Confession of Freedom, Peace, Social Equality, International Reconciliation, and Human Dignity. And May 1st
How do you even put that on a calendar, dude?
Isn't just a German holiday. It's actually known as International Workers' Day and is observed by a lot of countries all over the world. On this map, it's all of the red countries. Here in the US, Labor Day is celebrated as well, but instead of May 1st, it's held on the first Monday of September. Now, of course, the Federal Republic of Germany wasn't the only German state that was founded after World War II. In the same year, the Soviet occupation zone became the Deutsche Demokratische Republik, for short DDR, or in English, the German Democratic Republic, GDR. Up until 1990, these two German countries coexisted and were colloquially known as East Germany and West Germany. That's the German state that still exists today. What's interesting is that after the collapse of East Germany, their laws were sorted out a lot more radically than it was done with the laws of the Third Reich, where pretty much everything that wasn't explicitly erased got to stay. Even our constitution, the Grundgesetz, shows remnants from the Third Reich, not necessarily in terms of legislation, but in regards to terminology. The third section of the German constitution about discrimination mentions that no person can be favored or disfavored because of sex, parentage, race, language, homeland and origin, faith, or religious or political opinions. To an American, this probably sounds completely normal, but in German, the word for race, Rasse, has become very controversial over the last few decades, and due to Germany's history, has a very different connotation than its English equivalent. I'll tell you more about that topic in my next video. The German state of Saarland actually erased the word from their state constitution earlier this year. However, the federal government just announced in February that after years of wanting to change this word in the German constitution, they're dropping these plans now due to how complicated this would be legally, and because the Central Council of Jews was having doubts about this step. After all, the word Rasse in some way commemorates the persecution of millions of people in Germany, and they said that's something that should never disappear from our collective memory. If you know of any other German laws that are remnants from the Nazi regime, feel free to leave a comment down below. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you have.
Let me think about all the German laws. Yeah, you got that one where, no, of course not. Of course I don't know any. German laws off the top of my head that date back to the Nazi regime. Let me think. No, of course not. I don't know. I don't know any of them. Maybe you guys do. If you do, then you can feel free to let me know in the comments, but I don't know any, definitely not off the top of my head. It is interesting to see that these laws are still around. I'm curious to see, like I said, in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, are these still going to be around, or are people going to want to change them or remove them altogether because of their affiliation with where they came from? I don't know. I mean, it's definitely a real possibility, I would say. But I'm curious what you guys have to say about it. Let me know down in the comments below. At any rate, though, that's all the time that I have for today. Thank you guys so much for being here, and as always, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace.